It's been a while since I've done a tutorial or a guide here on the VR Playground channel. And while I was away, not really producing videos here on YouTube, I was still tinkering around with Unreal Engine and I was still working on little side projects here and there. One of the things that I kind of realized while I was away and still tinkering with my own things was that I needed a way to develop content quicker. And so this gave me an idea. What if I started creating plugins for everything that I do? So for example, I could have a shooter template where I can drag and drop a bunch of things in, make a few modifications where it's necessary, and everything is good to go. I could do the same for some sort of adventure action game, maybe a puzzle game, all sorts of different possibilities. Now, when it comes to shooters, my biggest inspiration has been Half-Life Alyx, because aside from being a very awesome game to play, the mechanics in the game are downright simple, and there's not a lot necessary that you really need to know in order to get these mechanics up and running. With that in mind, I wanted to create a shooter template. Now, I'm going to be taking inspiration from a lot of the Half-Life Alyx mechanics, and this is going to include things like not only player movement, but also how we interact with our weapons, how they fire, how they reload, as well as how we interact with our environment, such as interactable drawers, cabinets, doors, all sorts of different things like that. Now, this isn't going to be an exact one-to-one replica of Half-Life Alyx by any means, but I want to take a lot of inspiration from the way that Half-Life Alyx does things and put this into my own template, so that way when I go forward and I want to create new projects in the future, I have a lot of things already set up for me, and it's just a matter of connecting the dots wherever it is necessary, and make a few modifications to things like maybe weapons, player movement, the way that the enemies interact with the environment, and things like that. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the video, and I want to show you exactly how I'm going to get started with setting up our player movement. Now real quick, before we actually get started with tinkering around with our blueprints or project or anything like that, I want to take a second and talk about some of the things that I've actually done to this project beforehand, because I did a little bit of setup, so that way hopefully all the guides that I do, after this point are pretty much set and ready to go. I can just launch the project and go right into recording and editing this plugin. So let's real quick start with how I set up the project. So this is a C++ with a blank template. This is a brand new level. So I did just go into here, new level. I just did basic. So this is a basic level. It is using mobile and scalable settings with the starter content enabled. Now C++ is going to be important for later on down the line, because what I would like to do later on is tinker around with gameplay tags. Now I've done a little bit of this before, but from my understanding, gameplay tags will only work in a C++ project, because you need to do a little bit of code here and there in order to get gameplay tags working. And that's something I really want to do for weapons later on down the line, so that way I can modify the way that certain weapons just behave in the world. And I think this will be the best way of doing it later on. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of other things that I'm going to do in C++, but I also figured it would just be better to have that right from the get-go, so that way I don't have to worry about that later on down the line. Now, the project itself, aside from setting up a blank level, I did put in a few things. So I have a couple plugins. Electronic Nodes and Blueprint Assist are kind of givens for me. I did not mean to smack that mic. I do have this plugin that I set up. I'm not actually going to be using this. I just use it to import a few things. I'll talk about that in a second. And I did, aside from setting up the map, I did import a few meshes and characters. Now this is actually from SYNTY Studios. From what I recall, they have a prototype pack that you can buy. And so these are all of their assets. I think once the plugin is done and I know what I ended up using and what I didn't, I'm going to go through and kind of clean out anything that I don't need. But I just kind of imported everything, so that way I just have it all and I don't have to worry about importing it all later. So I got some just little dummy characters, and I have a bunch of FBX stuff, just a bunch of static meshes. It includes things like environment, weapons, icons, all sorts of different things. Not affiliated with them, just to be clear. I just really like a lot of the things that SYNTY does. I do also, of course, have their textures imported. I don't know that I'll actually end up using a whole lot of these. Right now I'm only using this one. And last thing, getting into the cell shade materials function, or the cell shade material plugin, I imported a few things that I needed from there. So I have this material. This is just a very simple cell shaded material that's using an unlit material. Nice, it's low performance, so I just have that set up. I do have a couple of material functions that I did also bring in. This is just kind of a quick little overview if you want to have a look at how these material functions are set up. It's nice and simple, not too overly complicated, but you can duplicate that if you would like. This is just kind of how I like to style my static and skeletal meshes. And last thing, this isn't something I imported from that plugin that I created, but this is just an overlay material, and I'll be showing you how this works over time, but just to give you an example, this just kind of creates an outline. So if I took, for example, just some random FBX, so let me see here. Let me find just something real quick. I feel like this beginning is taking a little longer. Let's just grab some stairs. I feel like this is taking a little longer. So when we drag in a static or skeletal mesh, what we can do is go over here to details, and we should find something called an overlay material. And so we can attach, I called this m_overlay_outline. I can attach that straight to a static mesh. I do believe it doesn't show up all the time. Interesting. I don't know what's not showing up. All right, so something I did forget, the overlay material does not work on nanite meshes, and I'm willing to bet I might have nanite enabled. I had this problem in a previous project. Static meshes are not affected by nanite though, so I do have an overlay material applied to this. So if you can see I reverse that, and then I can reapply that outline. It works just fine. Only skeletal meshes have it in the actual asset details. I don't know why static meshes do not. I will disable nanite between this guide and the next, so that way that won't be a problem in the future. But that is the reason that the overlay material is not working. There might be one or two more settings, and I will talk about that once I have that fixed. All right. I think I did enough talking about all the setup. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing I'm going to want to do, I want to set up our player. And actually I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a new folder. I'm going to call this blueprints, just to get some of this out of the way. I want to keep it somewhat organized, so I'll go into there, blueprints, perfect. All right, and I want a blueprint class, and we're just going to do a pawn. And I'm just going to call this BP underscore, I'll call it base player. All right. And that will enable that. I did just realize though, there is a plugin that I did forget to enable. I do need the OpenXR plugin in order to get all this working. For one reason, actually let me check real quick if there is something in the event graph. HMD, no it is not. Okay, so there is one plugin that I do need to enable then, that I did forget about. There's going to be the OpenXR plugin. This is going to give me a little bit of blueprint functionality that I'm going to need. So I'm just going to apply that, restart now, and I'll be back in 1 second. All right, so I feel like this has been a lot of setup. So OpenXR plugin is enabled. I'll go and close that for now. Now we can get started with our player and everything. So there's going to be a couple things we're going to want to do. First off, I am going to need a capsule collision. This is going to be for our player's collision with the environment. And I think I'm actually going to, let me think for a second. I'm trying to think. I think I need to set that as our root component as well. A couple of standard things, of course. We're going to need the camera. Okay, that's going to be for our player movement. And something I'm going to want to do in camera as well, there should be an option for, I think it's XR or VR, or maybe it's called lock. Yeah, lock to HMD. Disable that. We're going to manually move around our camera, so that way we can also move around our capsule collision and collide with the environment as well. In addition to that, we're also going to need a scene component. And I'm just going to call this motion controller root, and we're going to attach 2 motion controllers to this. Come on, motion controller. There we go. So we'll call this motion controller left, and I think I should just be able to duplicate that. There we go. Motion controller left and motion controller right. And then let's have a look. I do need to make sure that the right one is set to motion source right. Perfect. That should be all of our initial setup done. I am going to do one more quick thing as well so we can see our hands. I'm going to add a static mesh component. Left hand mesh. And we're also going to do right hand mesh, and I'm just going to attach these to each of the motion controllers. I don't believe, let me just double check, I don't believe there's like any hand meshes here. Yeah, I have like some other little ones, but let me see, there might be something else I can use. Let's use this. We'll use this little controller icon. Just something a little fun, something a little different. Yeah, sure. This will just be something fun. So, something so that way we can see where our hands are. We don't have to use this. You could just use like a cube or something, but I kind of want to do something fun and different. So we'll stick with that for now. I might change that later on to a different mesh, but just so we can have something fun. Perfect. All right, so initial setup all done. Let's now jump into our event graph. Now there's going to be a couple things we're going to do. Begin play shouldn't be necessary. We should not need that. Construction script, we don't really need to do anything, but I'll leave that open anyways. And we do want to make sure this should be enabled by default, but I want to make sure that tick is enabled. Start with tick enabled. Yep. So something to keep in mind, and something that I will be doing throughout these guides, is I'm going to be disabling tick wherever it's not necessary. I just feel like, I don't know, to me it's just kind of a habit I've gotten into, just a little bit of extra, I guess, horsepower you can throw into a project. I don't know that it really makes that much of a difference, but I like to do that. Okay. Now, first thing we're going to need is we're going to need orientation and position, okay? This is going to be the first thing we're going to need. Actually, you know what? We are going to need the construction script. Let's grab our construction script, and I want to do last position update. And I'm actually going to make this a transform. This is just so that way our player won't move around based off of where they are in the world space. So I'm actually going to do this. And then we will split, and we're only really going to be using rotation and position, and I'll go and organize that real quick. I am also going to take this, and just to try and keep things organized, I'm going to throw this into a category. I'm just going to call this, we'll call this player movement. Okay. Actually, no, I'm going to change this, because I want to save movement for something different. I'm going to call this positioning. That's what I'm going to call this. I don't know that I'm going to have a lot in this section, but I want that anyways. All right. So, first things first, we're going to need... I'm actually going to split this into a couple functions. So, because I need to be able to do a couple things, okay? So, first we need height, update. And actually, I'm going to label this a little different. I'll go and do this. So I'm a little all over the place with this because I want to make sure that I get everything. So we're going to need to update our player's height. We're also going to need to update our player's position. Okay, I'll go and move that into positioning. And then we're also going to need to update their rotation. And then last thing we're going to need is we will need to update our hand position. Actually, I'm going to label this a little different. We'll do position underscore hand, just because we have position there. Perfect. All right. So let's go ahead. Before I forget, I want to drop all of these just in here so that way I don't forget to call them. And this is all just going to be so that way we can move around our player. And actually, I'm trying to think. I think I want to do this in a certain order. I want to do height. Then we will do our position. And then I think I want to do rotation and our position in hand. And then let me just organize that real quick. Perfect. All right, compile and save all that. Okay. Now, get HMD, nope, orientation. I don't know why I keep wanting to go to HMD. orientation and position. Okay. So we have a lot of our initial setup out of the way. Let's talk about what this function does. This function will actually give us the raw data of where our headset is in its world space. So, for example, if we take our device position, what we want to do is we want to take this, and actually I'm going to split this, and I want to take our capsule, and using our capsule, I want to set height. Set capsule half height. There we go. Okay. Setting the half height is actually pretty easy. All we're going to do is we're going to take our device position Z, because this is going to be our Z position is going to be the distance the player has from their physical ground to the height of the headset. So I'm going to take this and divide by 2 because we need the half height. So we'll divide that by 2. We'll attach that right there and hit F. Perfect. And that should work just fine. Now we might need to later on, because of this height function, it's possible I'll need to set up how our player spawns in, but I'm not going to worry about that quite just yet. Position. Position is going to be pretty easy as well. So we're going to get... position is always really weird. I'm going to actually come back to that one. Let's worry about the rotation first, because rotation's easy. Okay, so we're going to need our capsule, and we're going to need our camera, and we're also going to need that orientation. I keep misspelling it. Orientation and position. I'm actually just going to copy that so that way I can reuse that. I'm actually going to put that here. Okay, I guess it won't let. I guess it doesn't want to let me. Let me see if it'll let me, so that way I can. Okay, perfect. Just so I have that here. Is it only letting me copy it once? There we go. Okay, let's quick compile save. All right, rotation is pretty easy. We're going to split this, and our rotation. Let me make sure I have this all correctly, because I want to make sure that we're moving our player around correctly. So our Z rotation is going to be this one right here. So that's going to be our left and right. So we want to assign that. That one, actually. I think I'm actually going to take that, and I'm just going to assign that completely to the camera. So I think I'm actually not going to do anything with this. I'm just going to set relative rotation. And I will want to modify this later because I want to make a snap turning. But for now, this is how I'm going to leave this. So we'll do that. And this will allow for us to move around our camera. So straightforward. Position. Okay, so positioning is always really weird. So positioning... We're going to want to take our last position update. This is actually going to be required here. And what I want to do is I'm going to need this, and then I'm going to need our capsule, and I am going to need our camera. I probably should have done this in height, but I think it'll be fine here in position. Okay. So camera is actually pretty easy. All we're going to do is we're going to set relative location right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this struct pin, and I want to pass this Z divided by 2. And the reason why, I will show you in 1 second why we're doing divided by 2 here. We'll do that. Perfect. The reason we want to do divided by 2 is the center point of our capsule, which is what our camera is going to be based around, is right in the center there of our capsule. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that this camera is right up here at the top. It'll just make things a little easier. And actually, while I'm thinking about this too, I'm going to reduce this radius just a little bit. There we go. Just a little thing that popped in my head. There's a lot of different thoughts going on right now. All right. Now, the capsule position, what we're going to want to do is I want to add relative location. Yeah, we'll do add relative location. This should still modify the world position because our capsule is the root component, but I think this should still work fine. I'm going to split this, and what I want to do is I want to, let me real quick split. I think I clicked on the wrong spot. There we go. Split, and then I want to split this. And then I want to take our X position, and this might need to be reversed. I'm going to test this at the end, because it's possible that these X and Y's might need to be reversed. We'll take those, drop those into our X and Y. And then something very important, I want to set this to sweep. I don't want this to teleport, and this should allow for our collision to work very smoothly. And then last thing I want to do, I'm actually going to copy this and just bring this over instead of dragging a bunch more nodes. Actually, I need to do this at the end. So let me instead, I'm going to set our last position update, split our, recombine our struct pins, and then I want to split this. And then this needs to be done at the very end, so that way on the next tick we can use all the correct information and everything. Go and reorganize that. Okay. So like I said, I might need to change around this section right here. I will test that right now at the end, and we'll see how that goes. I think this should all work fine. Okay. Finally, we have our position hand, and this is also going to be an interesting one. So our position hand, I need to make sure I'm thinking about this correctly. Let's grab our camera, and here what I want to do is I want to get world location. And the reason I want to get world location is because this needs to be placed in the world. So what I want to do is I want to take our world location, and this is something else I might also need to modify a little bit, but I'm going to try this real quick. And wrong thing. I'm going to try this and see how this works. And if this works correctly, this should allow for me to fully, god dang it, Windows is being weird. Let me do this. So I'm just going to take this, we're going to do our world location minus our orientation position, and then what I want to do is I want to take this motion control root, and I want to set the world location to this position here. And then let me do that, and we'll organize. Perfect. So we should end up with something that looks a little like that. All right. So this should allow for our player to all work correctly. I'm going to remove our player start for now. We're not going to be worrying about player spawning just yet. And I want to go into our player and drop that in. I'm going to move this to just origin. I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Perfect. And then real quick, I want to make sure that this is auto-possessed. Oh, here we go. Auto-possessed by player 0 and auto-receive input by player 0. Perfect. And this should allow for our player to work. So I am going to hook up my VR headset and we're going to see how well this works. So something else too, I want to make sure first off, hands are moving with me properly. Which they do seem to be. I want to make sure our player is moving around the space, which like I said, because we have a grid on the ground, it's really easy to see. I'm roughly centered on this spot, and it does look, I did not mean to smack that. It does look like we are moving correctly. Okay, which is good. Now, what I can also do to double check is if I hit the tilde key, the one right above our tab, I can type in show. I think I hit an extra key there, did I? I did not. Okay. Show collision. And what should happen is you can kind of see it. There are collisions all around us. Hopefully this is showing up clearly in OBS too. But what I want to look at is this one right here, our capsule. And this does do a pretty good job of also showing that our capsule is moving around, because I can see it a little more clearly when I'm moving. And obviously you still want to make sure that hands are in the right spot. And like I said, this is going to need some modification when we go around for movement and all that kind of stuff. Our capsule is somewhat stationary, so that's all good. That's kind of what I want. And yeah, this seems to be working just fine. which is awesome. So we have our player moving. This should allow for us to collide with the environment. As of right now, I don't know if you can tell, there's no gravity or anything, but that'll be something else that we will include in a future guide as well. So I want to include gravity. I want to be able to obviously move around, and those are going to be the next couple that we do before we get into starting to develop things like weapons and interactable objects and all that kind of stuff. We want to get the base out of the way first. Now that's going to be it for this first one. In the next one, I want to get into moving and rotating our player. And for this, I want to add in more than one form of movement and rotation. I want smooth and snap rotation, as well as teleportation and locomotion movement. Optionally, I do also want to see if I can add in real quick a way to enable or disable one or both of those. So I want to make sure that all of this is nice and set up in the next one. And then we're going to get into interacting with things like weapons, doors, drawers, all sorts of different things in our environment. And later on down the line, we'll also start implementing things like simple enemies that will attack our player as well. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next reality.